Hello, everybody. My name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today, we're going to be comparing Tim Keller and Joel Webbon because they both have something in common, but they have a majorly distinct response from it. And that is a very interesting development that I was unaware of. And that goes for both Tim Keller and Joel Webbon. I was not aware that they had something in common, and that is they both have a gay brother. So we're going to dive into this story and their response, both of their responses to these events. And what's interesting is both of these things were highlighted on social media last week, or Friday going into Saturday and the weekend. And it's a very interesting development because someone used the Joel Webbon situation to dunk on him, and I thought that was a self-owned. So we're going to get to the anti-Christian nationalists highlighting this. But first, I want to let you know Evangelical Dark Web is a Christian news gathering and commentary ministry. We've done a lot of research on Tim Keller over the years, and I believe that Tim Keller is a false teacher. He's a theological liberal. He was compromised on the issue of homosexuality, which we'll get into in this video. And but other than that, he was a theological liberal. So you can support our work over to Evangelical Dark Web and our Patreon like system. But the least you can do is like this video and subscribe to the channel, to the podcast if you are new, and if you are interested in Christian news gathering and commentary that does not compromise and will call out false teaching and false teachers. So, with that said, let's dive into the story. I wrote an article about this subject, Tim Keller versus Joel Webbon, family compromise, and, it's a working headline. We'll see if it makes a video. But, yeah, who knew that they both had a gay brother? And one of the lesser known issues with Tim Keller was his compromise on homosexuality. And the Gospel Coalition was the leading organization in pioneering the heresy known as side B theology, which teaches that homosexual desires and homosexual identity, so identifying as a gay Christian, is okay, as well as having same-sex attraction is not sinful. Which I would say, first of all, if you're a Christian, you can't identify as gay. That's just oxymoronic. Secondly, yes, lustful desires are sin, especially if they are unnaturally lustful. Like, this is an unnatural desire, therefore it is categorically sinful. There's not a righteous way to have this desire, which is a little bit different when people say, what about heterosexual lust? Well, there is actually a proper application for that, and it's a natural desire, but sinfully perverted. That's a lot different than something as an unnatural desire. There's not a righteous way to apply that. It's a completely unnatural desire. So, uh, with that said, the Gospel Coalition was instrumental in doing that. Mark Yarhouse wrote a white paper about it for the Gospel Coalition's campus ministries way back in the day, around like 2010. So this is like the earliest instance of this theology arising, and it populates. And a lot of book endorsements for gay affirming material, like Gregory Coles, like Greg Johnson. I'm stumbling because they're both named Greg, but you get the point. And then Preston Sprinkle emerges, and now he's the major player in this space. But he would not have been able to run if Tim Keller did not first walk on this issue. Now, Tim Keller had a brother, William Christopher Keller, also known as Billy, and that guy was a sodomite, and he died of AIDS in 1997. And this is well documented in the Colin Hansen Tim Keller biography. So Colin Hansen is like the managing editor of the Gospel Coalition. So it's not surprising that he would be Tim Keller's autobiographer. Now, this is not something that Tim Keller hid, but it's definitely something that, when you're researching his theology, it's not necessarily what comes up because, first of all, hardly anyone has really called out Tim Keller's compromise on homosexuality. That's just not really what gets called out. A lot of the stuff is the theistic evolution stuff, the fact that he's super woke, and you know, and he has a seeker-sensitive church in New York City. So a lot of stuff like that gets called out, but not exactly his compromise on sexuality. And then What's interesting is that, according to Keller, his brother made a deathbed confession because he was dying of AIDS. This was at least enough of an extended period of time that, he's getting regular visits while he's like bedridden. And, the Christians visited him while the gay affirming friends did not visit him. So that's highlighted. But, according to Richard Blackaby's review, there was a deathbed conversion, and I found that to be very interesting. And according to another review, uh, the guy's lawyer, Tim Keller's brother's lawyer, was liquidating his assets so that they could be donated to, homosexual activism. And another interesting fact is that Tim Keller, apparently, him and his wife went over and had dinner with their kids, with his brother and his brother's, uh, you know, the what's the word for it that you can say on YouTube? A buddy from behind. So that's what, Tim Keller exposed his own kids to this nonsense, and that is seriously bad parenting. Like, no, like, as I'll discuss, like, majority of people who are gay affirming because of a personal connection. So we'll get to that in a minute, but yeah, that's bad parenting. So there's a lot that comes out in these Keller affirming, Keller enjoyer reviews of Colin Hansen's biography of Tim Keller. And I found that to be very interesting. It's like, wow. And we're supposed to believe that this guy was a Christian, who converted on his deathbed. And I just don't really find it believable. But suddenly, Tim Keller saying that homosexuality doesn't send people to hell makes a lot of sense, out of concern for his brother. So while Keller maintained, and this is a quote, I came to understand his point of view and his struggle with Christian teaching, and in a very intense experience helped me express the classic Christian view without compromise, but with a new sympathy. This was far from reality, and I'll list some examples of Kellerites that also were compromised on this issue. So, Pastor Sean Mathis pointed out this quote from Tim Keller. He apparently wrote it to Gay City News, which sounds like a New York gay newspaper or something like that. And, it's this quote where he talks about this story with his brother and, how he maintained a, traditional Christian ethic, which is far from the case. And the Kellerites know this. I mean, I can point out a lot of counter examples, and maybe we can do that. So we can start with Greg Johnson, who is a PCA elder who hosted the first Revoice conference. Tim Keller endorsed his book. We can talk about Scott Sauls, another person who endorsed the Revoice conference. He was the Tim Keller of Nashville. He used to work underneath Tim Keller. He would be, run out of his church for leadership abuses. This came after he endorsed the Revoice conference. He has since become an egalitarian. Grant Hartley, whose name I wanted to remember before going on to this page, is a gay affirming. I think he kind of converted to Roman Catholicism, but he has explicitly credited Tim Keller with his views on homosexuality, which is, again, very interesting. Tim Keller Center for Cultural Apologetics, which was formed while he was alive, is full of people who embrace side B theology, such as Sam Alberry, the founder of Living Out. Yes, that kind of out. Rachel Gilson, who promoted pronoun hospitality. And there's a few other names that we can point out, including the guy who was canceled for being a little too horny at the Gospel Coalition, Joshua Butler, his name was. So, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time that I can just kind of know all these people's stories and stuff. But anyway, uh, yeah, Keller's story went viral, and so did Joel Webbon's. And I thought that this was interesting because I did not know this about Joel Webbon. I knew he had a communist brother, but I didn't know that his communist brother went by she, her. So that was news to me because I did not know that. So anti-Christian nationalist Mikhail Olson. Now, Mikhail Olson, just some background on this guy. He is a liberal. He writes for Christian Post, and also he works for the Babylon Bee. He actually spied on Joel Webbon's church and kind of posted about that on social media. And I hate watch a lot of sermons for Evangelical Dark Web over the years, but I've never hate worshipped with a church for research purposes. I've never done that. But anyway, he also wrote an article struggle sessioning Joe Rogan. Again, very woke individual here. Joe Webbon's trans brother. And, there's some screenshots of Joel's brother, uh, you know, saying that he was always misogynistic and a jerk, even when they were teens and stuff like that. So, this is a very interesting opportunity to dunk on Joel Webbon. Now, regardless of what you think of Joel Webbon, not a perfect individual by any means, but this was a cell phone by Mikhail Olson. Like Joel Webbon has not compromised on the issue of homosexuality, despite having a personal connection that would compromise many people. So you want to highlight the one guy, and I'm not saying he's the only one, but let's being hyperbolic for effect here. Joel Webbon's the one person who hasn't compromised on homosexuality with a personal friend or family member being a homosexual. Like, are we really going to dunk on him for that? Like, not only did he not compromise doctrinally, but he's also reputationally homophobic. And I mean that in the way that a surface is hydrophobic, which means it does not absorb or attract water. Instead, it repels it and does not mix with water. There's a way to control language, and I think we should own that term now. Because phobic is not always a fear. In fact, most of the time it's not, if you're not psychologizing language here. Now, almost every single time, and I mean like every single time, it seems, when someone is compromised on homosexuality, it is because they are indulging the sin of someone else who's close to them, be they a friend or family member. And this is why Alistair Begg's advice to the grandmother was sinful and extremely unwise. Like it was extremely unwise for Alistair Begg to counsel a grandmother to attend a gay wedding, because this is what you're throwing her into. You're throwing a grandmother on the front lines of a culture war, and this is how people get compromised. It's by personal relationships. So that was terrible advice by Alistair Begg. He still hasn't repented of that stuff. But nevertheless, that is the story, a tale of two people and how they dealt with a personal compromising situation. And credit to Joel Webbon, when many people, most would have compromised because of that, he did not. And that deserves a lot of credit. So that's all I got for today. My name is Ray, it's the Evangelical Dark Web. Have a blessed day. Stay based. Christ is King, and we will catch you on the next one.